Okay, so we're going to do an AO2 essay on the strengths and weaknesses of Foot's virtue ethics. Now, in the exam you could get an AO2 essay question on strengths and weaknesses of virtue ethics generally. You might get one on Aristotle's virtue ethics, McIntyre's virtue ethics, or like in this case, Foot's virtue ethics. So what you need to think about is what are the general strengths and weaknesses, and how can you apply them to one of the different theories, if that's what it asks you to do, or are there particular strengths or weaknesses of the different theories. So look at the other videos, the other AO2 videos on the channel if you want to look at, just remind yourself about AO2 essay skills. So the first strength of Foot's virtue ethics is it's much more practical to base our decision on whether somebody is moral or not on their whole life, like Foot does, and actually how all virtue ethicists do. This is opposed to act-centred ethics, which judges whether somebody is good or bad based on on their actions. Now, that could just be one action. So, for example, a utilitarian might say, if you've done something which has not resulted in the greatest happiness for the greatest number of people, then you are a bad person. Now, this seems quite unfair to judge a person's morality on just a single act. Or just a number of acts. It just seems unfair. That's why Foot's virtue ethics is a strong theory, because she recognises that becoming virtuous and therefore moral is a life project, and she judges your morality on the course of your whole life. So that allows you to make mistakes. It allows you to think that every action is an opportunity to develop your character. It seems much fairer and much more practical to judge whether somebody is a good person or not based on their whole life rather than on just individual actions. However, our first weakness and a counter-argument to that is actually Foot's virtue ethics, like all virtue ethics, is not practical at all, because it does not actually provide answers to specific moral dilemmas. It doesn't tell you what is right, what is wrong, and in fact, it doesn't even tell you how to work out what is right, what is wrong. It tells you how to work out whether something is likely to be done by a virtuous person, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's always going to be right, always going to be wrong. And so this is the criticism that Robert Loudon suggests, that it's not practical because it doesn't tell us what's right or what's wrong, or it doesn't even tell us how to work it out. So our second strength then is that Foot focuses on becoming virtuous not just because it's benefiting the self, but also because it benefits the whole society. Now that's a good thing, and that makes the theory a strong theory, because surely it's better to help society flourish than just to do things to benefit yourself, because if society flourishes, then you will benefit as a result of society flourishing, and everybody else benefits as well. So you'll benefit either way. You'll benefit if you do stuff just for yourself, or you'll benefit if you do stuff for the community. So you might as well do stuff to benefit the community, to make your community or society better, because then not only are you benefiting, but your whole society is benefiting. So it's good because she promotes the good of the whole society. However, a counter-argument to that, and actually a weakness which Foot herself comes up with, is that really you end up questioning what's the point of trying to be virtuous, because quite often when you are acting in a virtuous way, you might have to give up your own self-interest, or you might have to do something which you know will not be good for you. So and that could lead you to question, well, why be virtuous at all? Why would you want to do that? So, for example, a friend has a new jacket which they love, and they ask you what you think, and really you think it's awful, but you know if you tell the truth that it will upset them. However, you're also trying to be virtuous, and so you're going to you're going to have to be honest, because you're going to be virtuous, and honesty is a virtue. So you're going to have to be honest. And so you are honest, and you tell your friend that you think their jacket is awful, and they get upset, and you become very unpopular as a result. Now, that might lead you to question, well, what is the point in becoming virtuous? Why would you want to be a virtuous person if it's going to result in you becoming unpopular, your friends falling out with you, who knows, that society hating you, and so it makes you wonder why you would want to do it anyway. Now, just as an aside to that, or as a development of that, what Aristotle would say is that a virtuous person would never ask that question. They would never ask what is the point, because they know what the point is. The point is to reach eudaimonia, and that is the ultimate good, and it is good in and of itself. So becoming virtuous is a good thing to do. It might not necessarily be good all the time, but ultimately it will lead you to the ultimate good, the ultimate end. And so that's why he says if only the philosopher really can reach eudaimonia, or one of the reasons, because they would not be interested in their self-gratification, their self-happiness at different points. They would be interested in the end goal of them becoming virtuous, which is eudaimonia. And what happens on the way there is not necessarily that important. It's getting there and reaching eudaimonia which is most important. So coming on to the final strength then, unlike Aristotle, who says only the philosopher can become virtuous, which is very elitist, i.e. Only certain people can do it, that's very elitist. It's like there is an elite in society, and in Aristotle's case it's the philosopher, and only they can reach eudaimonia. It's very elitist. It's not eudaimonia is not accessible to everybody, only the philosopher. Unlike Aristotle, Foote says that everyone can develop virtues, it's just that we develop them to a different degree. So her degrees of virtue is the strength of her theory, because she takes into account the fact that, for some people it'll be harder, for some people it'll be easier. And unlike Aristotle, who says only some people can be virtuous, she says really anybody can be virtuous, it's just it will be to a different degree. And so an example is a rich man who gives to charity and a poor man who gives to charity. They both develop and show that they have justice by giving to charity, but because it was more difficult for the poor man to give to charity, he develops justice in a higher degree if he gives to charity than the rich man, because it was very easy for the rich man to act justly because he's got so much money. And the third weakness then, so finally in a counter-argument to that, you could say it's just unrealistic actually to assume that people want to become virtuous and want to benefit society. And if you look at the video about virtue ethics and human nature, this is an argument that came up there as well. Virtue ethics assumes, and Foote assumes, that we all want to help the community, or at least the ideal human would want to help the community. And it's just unrealistic, some people would say, in today's society to expect people to want to give up their own interests in order to benefit society. We're too individualistic and selfish now. It's just part of our modern society that we are not so interested in others. We're interested in ourselves, and we're interested in bettering ourselves. And this is partly why McIntyre suggests we live in a moral vacuum, because we're very individualistic and selfish. And so it's just unrealistic for Foote to expect that people will want to become virtuous and will want to benefit society.